One Piece live-action season. 2 works for one simple reason: it finally makes the world feel bigger than the crew. Season 1 was about whether Netflix could make One Piece believable at all. Season 2 is about something much harder. Can this adaptation make the Grand Line feel dangerous, unpredictable, emotional, and still fun? And honestly, I think the answer is yes. Not perfectly, not without compromises, but much more confidently than Season 1. This season feels like the point where the show stops proving it deserves to exist and starts proving it may actually have a long future. Before we get into spoilers, here's the clean version. Season 2 is more ambitious, more emotionally grounded, and much better at balancing spectacle with character than the first season. So spoiler warning from this point on. I'm not doing a scene-by-scene recap because that's the fastest way to make a review boring. What I want to talk about is why this season works, where it stumbles, and why it leaves me much more confident about Season 3. Because this season had a difficult job. It had to take us from Logetown into the Grand Line, introduce Baroque works as a real threat, make Laboon work, make Giants work, make Drum Island work, and most importantly, make Chopper work. That is a ridiculous amount of material and tonal variety for 8 episodes. The fact that the season survives that load at all is impressive. The fact that it's often this entertaining is the bigger win. The first thing Season 2 gets right is scale.
It's the Grand Line!
Not just visual scale, but emotional scale. The show understands that entering the Grand Line should feel like crossing a border into a stranger world. Logetown has that threshold energy. Reverse Mountain feels like the series announcing that the rules have changed. Laboon is exactly the kind of emotional absurdity that can destroy a live-action adaptation if the tone is even slightly wrong. But here it works because the show plays it sincerely instead of apologizing for how weird it is. Then you get to Little Garden, where the season has to sell giants, dinosaurs, and Baroque works chaos without turning into noise, and somehow, most of the time it does. Even when the effects vary from shot to shot, the direction usually keeps the momentum moving forward. That confidence also shows up in the casting. Smoker is one of the clearest examples of the adaptation locking into the right frequency. He feels dangerous, controlled, and visually convincing in a way that instantly raises the level of every scene he enters. Vivi is another big win. She had skepticism around her before release, but the performance gives her urgency, intelligence, and enough emotional weight that she doesn't feel like a plot device. She feels like the person the season quietly builds around. And then there's Chopper, who is probably the biggest make or break test in the entire season. If Chopper failed, people would remember nothing else. But the show got the most important part right. Not just the design, but the feeling. He's not only cute, he lands emotionally. And what really helps is that Season 2 understands that One Piece cannot survive in live action on spectacle alone. It has to keep its heart. That's why Drum Island matters so much. Drum Island is not just another stop on the route. It's the section that tests whether this version of One Piece can still hit emotionally after all the production flexing. And for me, that's where the season proves itself, because once Chopper, Halulik, Kureha, Dalton, and Walpole enter the picture, the show has to pivot from adventure energy into grief, rejection, hope, and inherited will. That is peak One Piece territory. If a live-action version can't carry that, then all the giant sets and CGI in the world mean nothing. Here, it carries it. Not flawlessly, but strongly enough that the emotional spine stays intact. Another thing I like is that the season doesn't feel trapped by literalism. It's clearly trying to honor the manga without treating adaptation like photocopying. That's the correct instinct. A live-action version should not be judged by whether it reproduces every panel one-to-one. It should be judged by whether it preserves intent, emotional logic, and character function while making necessary changes for pacing and medium. In that sense, a lot of the additions and reshuffling work. Baroque works feels more present, more connected, more like a looming system than just a sequence of enemies. That matters because Season 2 is really laying track for Alabasta. It's less a self-contained war and more a tightening net. The better this season makes that machinery feel, the stronger Season 3 becomes. But the season is not beyond criticism, and the biggest recurring issue is Luffy.
Okay, you don't get too close.
Not Iñaki Godoy's energy, not his charm, the writing around the character. Because there are moments where this version of Luffy feels too hesitant, too softened, or too conventionally reactive compared to the terrifying certainty that makes manga and anime Luffy special. Luffy is weird, reckless, and often childish, yes, but he is rarely spiritually unsure. That difference matters. If you flatten his conviction, you don't just change the tone of a scene, you weaken the gravity of the whole crew around him. Several reviewers picked up on that tension, and I think they're right. It doesn't ruin the season, but it is the one criticism that feels structural rather than cosmetic. The second weakness is compression. Some of that is unavoidable. One Piece is enormous, and no live-action version was ever going to move at anime pace. So I'm not criticizing the season for cutting. I'm criticizing the season for the moments where the cuts can be felt. There are sections where the adaptation is so busy covering ground that it risks reducing discovery into transit. And in a world like One Piece, discovery is half the magic. When the show has time to breathe, it's excellent. When it has to sprint, you can sometimes see the seams. That's also where the visual quality becomes more uneven. Some effects and creature work look terrific. Some shots feel like the budget had to pick its battles. That trade-off is understandable, but still visible. Still, one of the season's smartest choices is that it keeps rewarding side characters. Smoker and Tashigi don't feel like filler Marines. Vivi doesn't just arrive to explain the next arc, she changes the moral center of the story. Robin has the exact kind of presence you want from someone who should feel both alluring and dangerous. Even Wapol, who is obviously meant to be hated, works because the show knows how irritating he needs to be. And Zoro continues to benefit from choreography that makes him look elite without turning every fight into the same kind of cool. Season 2 is at its best when it trusts that One Piece becomes richer, not messier, when many character energies collide. What really impressed me, though, is that Season 2 feels like a promise kept. Season 1 sold the dream of the Grand Line. Season 2 had to cash it. And according to Netflix's own framing, that was the whole point. Scale it up, make the world stranger, make the threats fiercer, and make the route feel larger. That ambition shows. You can see it in the environments, in the way Baroque works is threaded through the season, in the confidence to let something as tragic and bizarre as Laboon sit next to something as emotionally direct as Drum Island. This is a bigger season, yes, but more importantly, it is a more self-assured season. It now feels like the show understands what parts of One Piece must stay sincere in order for the madness to work. And that's why I'm leaving Season 2 more excited for Season 3 than I was before it started, because Season 3 is no longer just a hopeful possibility. Netflix renewed it early, production has already begun, and key Season 2 characters like Vivi, Chopper, Mr. Zero, Miss All Sunday, and Cobra are positioned to matter even more going forward. That matters because this season doesn't end by feeling complete. It ends by feeling loaded. Loaded with political conflict, loaded with emotional payoff, and loaded with the sense that the real test is still coming. If Season 2 proved this adaptation can handle expansion, Season 3 has the chance to prove it can handle escalation. So my final take is this. Season 2 is not great because it adapts more things. It's great because it finally feels comfortable being One Piece. Weird, emotional, theatrical, occasionally messy, but full of heart and conviction. It still has problems. Luffy's characterization needs to be sharper. Some compressed sections need more breathing room, and the visuals are not equally strong in every corner. But the season's highs are now strong enough that those weaknesses feel like things to refine, not signs of collapse. Season 1 made people believe this adaptation could work. Season 2 makes me believe it might actually last. Did you like Season 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.
Hey, Flower Pops. You got some paint?